I'm Brittany, this is Joe, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we get to continue reading Volume 1 of Guardian. We are on page 123 for Chapter 8. We usually read for about a couple of hours. There's a break in the middle. We get through about 40-50 pages per session, and it's just a good old time. Please no spoilers down in the chat because there's always at least a few people who are reading along for the first time, much like I am, though I have seen the show. And I believe that's it. We had left off with our boy, our sweet summer child, Go Chang Chang, with something very creepy behind him. It was a bit of a cliffhanger. Not quite as literal as the other cliffhangers we've already had with this series, but here we are. So, if everything is well and you can hear me and all of that lovely jazz, which I had a little bit of a mic issue just before I started, so I'll be a little bit more paranoid about that than usual, we are going to begin. Feeling or no feeling, Go Chang Chung didn't dare turn around. Having been raised by the elderly for much of his life, he had been fed a lot of superstitious beliefs, including the common one that said to never look back when walking at night. Doing so would extinguish the lamp on each shoulder, and then the monsters would come get you. He was doing his best to keep himself under control, but the scene that had just played out was still vivid in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more petrified he became, as if that thing were about to catch up to him. It didn't look like lamps on his shoulders would keep it at bay. With a belly so engorged it looked pregnant, and arms like a mantis's pincers, Go Chang Chung touched his neck. With a head as delicate as his, the thing could decapitate 5 of him at once without breaking a sweat. His brain then replayed the image of the corpse in that narrow alley. Go Chang Chung hadn't seen the actual scene of the crime, but from photos he knew how it had looked. That young woman on the ground, her abdomen cut open. Look back. Don't look back. Look back. Go Chang Chung wiped away cold sweat and found himself walking faster. He quickly caught up with Shen Wei, who had Lian on his back. Go Chang Chung had never been a confrontational person. For him, running away was as natural as a cat eating fish or a dog eating meat. It was practically part of his genetic makeup, and right now his genes were telling him that the safest place was between Shen Wei and the black cat. Bringing up the rear was way too scary. But at that moment, Shen Wei suddenly stopped walking. Li Qian seemed to have stirred, but she hadn't woken up completely, so she started sliding down his shoulders. He had to stop to adjust his hold on her. Go Chang Chung could have overtaken him, but for some reason he instead came to a halt. In addition to not rushing ahead, he maintained his forward-facing position. Stiffly, without turning his head, he twisted his body sideways to take a quick glance back, then leaned against the wall. It was a kind of protective, alert pose for the sake of the people in front of him. Go Chang Chung had finally remembered something. I'm a police officer, he said to himself. I'm a police officer. I'm a police officer. I'm a police officer. He kept repeating it in his head, looping it again and again like he was a voice recorder, as if enough repetition would give him some sense of honor and courage. Unfortunately, the words, I am a police officer, weren't enough to ward off evil. It accomplished nothing but wasting his breath. He was still on the verge of losing his mind from fear. As he silently chanted, his vision began to blur. He belatedly put a hand to his face an instant before meeting Shen Wei's shocked gaze, which was how Go Chang Chung realized he had actually started crying. Was it any surprise that Shen Wei was shocked? An hour earlier, Shen Luoshi had still been an ordinary university professor, but in the course of that hour he had witnessed such bizarre things firsthand: a murderous black shadow, a talking cat, and a police officer who had been reduced to tears right in front of him. The truth was, Go Chang Chung himself didn't fully understand why he was crying. But then came the swift and unexpected realization that crying was the best possible option for venting his emotions and lessening his fear. It was certainly more useful than endlessly repeating, I'm a police officer. Valid! That is valid as heck, actually. Crying is healthy. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Taking a deep breath, he began to wail in earnest, but with the wailing came brave words. Hurry and run. I'll bring up the rear. I'll protect you guys. Shen Laoshe said nothing. It seemed very probable that he was numb from everything he'd seen, and that was why a hint of a smile flickered in his eyes. Maintaining their peculiar formation, the black cat rushed to the stairs and raced down toward the first floor. The two men with the unconscious girl were right behind him. Shen Wei was still holding Go Cheng Cheng's phone to use as a flashlight, and as they ran, its light swept across the corner of the stairwell. Before Shen Wei could make out what the light had revealed, an inhuman scream exploded out of Go Cheng Cheng. Even running flat out, Go Cheng Cheng was fully capable of screaming and crying. Clearly, despite the fact that he was a recluse, Officer Xiaoguo's lung capacity was excellent. Shen Wei took a closer look. What lay in the corner was a child. Something just fell over behind me. I'm assuming books of some variety. What lay in the corner was a child, but no, it was more accurately a fetus. A tiny thing. Me acting like I don't have tea right here. A tiny thing, even smaller than a newborn baby, probably premature. Beneath the sparse hair on its scalp, its head was like a squashed ball, broken open in places to reveal the ruin of its skull and brain. Its features were crooked and its empty mouth agape. It lay there quietly like a medical specimen, staring at them with warped, vacant pupils. I didn't think we needed trigger warnings with Guardian. What are you screaming for? Dutching admonished loudly. This is a hospital. Of course it's packed full of yin energy. There are plenty more where this one came from. Don't act like some country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world. What is that? Go Cheng Cheng managed. A little ghost of a fetus that was aborted before it was born. Dutching swiped at the tiny ghost. It vanished, letting out a cry like that of a kitten. Get moving. The hunger ghost is right behind us. Just casually. Just casually. In a previous life, Dutching must have been a doomsaying crow, not a cat. His words were still hanging in the air when that rotten stench hit Go Cheng Cheng and Shen Wei's noses. They both picked up the pace. While talking, they'd made it from the second floor inpatient area to the first floor, only to hear pounding steps behind them. What now? Go Cheng Cheng asked tearfully, his head somehow unusually clear. Isn't the hunger ghost like a shadow? How can it have such heavy footsteps? I already fucking said, this is a hospital. There are all kinds of things here. The cycle of life and death plays out here every day, not to mention the impurities of all kinds, Dutching yelled. Also, are you discriminating against overweight people? We fatties aren't thieves. We don't go around taking advantage of others. What's wrong with being overweight? Being overweight is fine. We have so many issues pinging back and forth, like rapid fire. Shen Wei had lost count of how many times he'd been left speechless that night. He couldn't begin to imagine what Zhao Yunlan's work environment was like with employees like these. Despite having someone on his back, Shen Wei didn't seem tired at all. He was still breathing easily. Now, seeing that the cat was about to explode, he could only coax, "Come on now, you two, don't fight. Where's the exit, kitty?" Daching's explosion was undeterred. Don't call me something so stupid, mortal. Divine cat, Shen Wei smoothly switched gears. It would appear we've been down this hallway already. Might the divine cat have some wisdom to share? Daching slammed on his brakes, coming to a stop so abrupt that Shen Wei nearly stepped on him. Only a frantic sidestep prevented it. Go Cheng Cheng, meanwhile, slumped against the wall like a dead dog, hyperventilating and letting out the occasional tearful hiccup. Daching's ears pricked up as he tilted his flat face to the side. In the cell phone's dim light, his feline eyes glowed eerily. After some consideration, he turned back and calmly said, "We've been going in circles." This time, the heavy footsteps approached from up ahead. Something seemed to be squirming inside the blurry shadows on the wall. On closer inspection, it was dozens of intertwined humanoid shadows locked in constant writhing struggle. They screamed soundlessly, ripping and biting at one another, but eternally joined. In this place, lives came to bitter ends every single day. Those who had lived those lives could only wander its corridors aimlessly, unable to leave. They were consumed by envy for the living, greedy for the scent of life, but unable to approach. Such resentment, such despair. Run! Da Ching felt like he'd been yelling the same instruction constantly throughout the evening. All he needed was a starting pistol and he'd be ready to officiate a track meet. The three humans and the cat managed to stumble into a small storage room. Go Cheng Chung, the last one inside, slammed the door shut as if his life depended on it. He plastered his entire body against the rusty-smelling door, holding it closed until the lock clicked. Only then did he finally have time to snort back the snot bubble that had escaped along with his tears, unable to believe he was really still alive. He just felt a ghostly hand on his neck, and the dark chill of the touch seemed to linger. Shen Wei set Li Qian down to the side and hurried to join him. Between them, they moved all kinds of things in front of the door as a makeshift barricade. But before they could even catch their breath, there was a forceful impact against the door from the other side. The clang was loud enough to drive Go Cheng Chung to his knees. There were 2 or 3 more powerful blows and then silence, until there came the sound of sharp nails scratching at the metal door. Go Cheng Chung had slid all the way down the door, but he was so startled by the noise that he flung himself away as if electrocuted, goosebumps rising all over his skin. Crying, he turned to Shen Wei. I haven't even gotten my first month's salary yet. Can't I at least see the money I won't even get to spend before I die? Thinking it would be somewhat impolite to laugh under the circumstances, Shen Wei adjusted his glasses to hide his amusement. Go Cheng Chung kept sobbing. Shen Loshe, do you have any unfulfilled wishes? Perhaps hoping to ease Go Cheng Chung's terror, Shen Wei gave the question careful consideration before nodding. I do. Through tears, Go Cheng Chung choked out. Like what? There is someone I met only by chance. There are no connections between us. To him, I must only be a stranger with whom he's exchanged a few words. Shen Wei spoke gently against the background noise of scratching nails. But I very much want to see him one more time. That's the end of the chapter. We are on page 129 for chapter 9. There are no connections. To him, I must only be a stranger with whom he's exchanged a few words. All right. Oh, okay. Sure. The man was maybe 30 years old. A guy with an average build, wearing wide-framed glasses and a string of sandalwood Buddhist prayer beads. Once out of his car, the first thing he did was fish his phone out of his pocket, turn on the camera, and aim it at his own face with the hospital in frame behind him. There in the darkness, he began recording. Special mission, September 1st, 20XX. 9:23 p.m., Baotou Road East, Dongcheng District, Dragon City 2nd Hospital, he muttered. Mission executor, Lin Jing. Over. A black SUV screeched up behind him. Zhao Yunlan tore off his seatbelt and leaped out. Unclog your brain and follow me quickly. We're up to our ears in trouble and you're standing around taking selfies? Oh, said the man called Jinling. Lin Jing. Ooh, I don't know why I'm going to default to Jinling, but I feel like that's going to be a thing. Lin Jing. It'll be fine. How the hell did I land myself in this situation? Zhao Yunlan seethed. Why is my entire team made up of non-humans and dumbasses? That's mean, but that's a good line. The whole hospital was shrouded in a black haze, and its immediate vicinity was deserted. None of the bustling passersby on Baotou Road East even seemed to see it. Zhao Yunlan dialed Go Cheng Chung and Shen Wei's numbers, neither of which were in service. Cursing to himself, he kicked the front door of the hospital open. Black fog rushed toward him as he intruded, but he barely broke stride even as he drew a palm-sized dagger from under his pant leg, sidestepped, and slashed the shadow in two. We've barely gotten into the chapter. You don't need to be hot about it that quickly, sir. You can give it a second. More black shadows came racing out of the hospital. Lin Jing, right on Zhao Yunlan's heels, pulled out a gun and started firing, picking them off without a single wasted shot or a hitch in the Buddhist scriptures flowing off his tongue. Is there something seriously unlucky about our useless newbie's birth chart? Zhao Yunlan looked at all the shadows clogging the hallway. It was like entering a drain pipe blocked with hair. Ugh, that's a really visceral visual to me for some reason. At the school, he attracted a resentful spirit, and now he's attracting ghosts at a hospital. If you dropped him into the investiture of the gods, he'd just be a soul-beckoning flag. Zhao Yunlan got jokes. We have a footnote for the soul-beckoning flag, though. In the classic Chinese novel Investiture of the Gods, written in the late 1500s and early 1600s, a soul-dispatching flag was used in battle. The reverse, a soul-beckoning flag, would assumedly draw souls in. Yes. I immediately went to, Moda Zuche. Hello. Form is emptiness, Lin Jing recited. Then he said, I'll conduct a ritual for him later. Form is emptiness is actually another footnote. It says Lin Jing is reciting part of the Heart Sutra, one of the more well-known sutras in the practice of Buddhism. The sutra discusses the practice of wisdom beyond studying rules, but because the character for form is sometimes used for discussing sex, one humorous reinterpretation is lust is a hollow goal. Interesting. Also, me being terrible with names, is Lin Jing who I think it is? Is he, Buzzcut. Him, yes? Is that him, or am I misremembering his name? Because I feel like it's him. Nerd Boy Science Guy! Thank you. It's been a couple of years since I've watched the show. Oh, but I love Science Boy. Form my ass. Either speak normally or shut up. Serenely, Lin Jing continued with his recitations. Wow. Emphasis syllable. Okay. Emptiness is form. Fuck your mother's second uncle, Zhao Yunlao snarled. After a moment of silence, Lin Jing pleaded sincerely, Boss, my mother's second uncle has long since passed, so please forsake these empty forms of wrath and lust. Zhao Yunlan had nothing to say in response. His loathing for work could be blamed directly on having people like this as co-workers. With a deep breath, he tucked his little dagger between his teeth and took out a yellow paper talisman in his lighter. Holding the talisman aloft, he lit it. The tiny flame immediately swelled to a ravenous blaze. One shadow was sucked in before it could escape. The flame, having fed on a dead spirit, reached a meter in height and surged down the corridor, swallowing the countless little ghosts that didn't manage to escape. It crashed through like a dragon of flame, consuming everything in its path with the force of a gas explosion. Amitabha, our Buddha is merciful, Lin Jing murmured. Zhao Yunlan's expression was dark. Enough already. In less than a minute, nothing remained but a pea-sized flame at the end of the hall, as if the towering inferno had been an illusion as ephemeral as fireworks. Zhao Yunlan strode over, bent down, and lit a cigarette with the tiny flame. Cigarette between his lips, he beckoned to Lin Jing and pushed open the door in front of him. They headed deeper inside. He's just exhaustingly hot about it. Meanwhile, the trio taking refuge in the storage room were unaware that salvation was close at hand. As the scratching at the door grew sharper and more frantic, so did Go Chung Chung's breathing. He was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. Chen Wei could only ignore him. Looking down at the cat, he asked, "What should we do now?" Daching was plainly a cat wise in the ways of the world. Calmly, he answered, I'm sure your call told Director Zhao enough about the situation. No need to worry. We just have to hold out a little longer until he comes to save us. Excuse me? What art am I looking at? We may not know yet. Why am I getting ahead of myself? Shenwei frowned. By himself. Is that safe? How will he get in? That was the part the professor focused on? Daching's tail gave a tired swish. Don't worry, he's got thick skin and tough flesh. A handful of puny little ghosts won't be able to chew through him. Leaning against the wall, Shenwei thought about it. Can't we figure out a way to save ourselves? Daching glanced up at him, a little confused. This Shenlo show was far too calm. How? He began to list off what they had to work with. A mortal, useless trash, someone sedated to the gills, and me, a mascot. Even if the four of us offered ourselves up in a steamer basket, do you think we'd be more than an appetizer for the hunger ghost? Shakily, Go Chung Chung asked, Didn't Shenlo smash it into pieces with that chair earlier? Earlier it was famished and desperate to feed, so it didn't watch its back, Daching said impatiently. You two are young men, so you have strong yang energy. That weakened it enough for you to get the upper hand, but with the overabundance of yin energy in this hospital, it'll be like it chugged several cases of energy drinks while chasing us. It could even be suffering from overnourishment by now. Oh fuck, another one! The cat was cut off by a child's shrill laughter coming from the corner. Shen Wei looked over and saw a small girl around 5 or 6 years old with a sickly, pale complexion. She was squatting on the floor, letting out creepy peals of laughter as she merrily grabbed at the black cat's tail. Before Shen Wei could check to see whether this little ghost had a monstrous face and oversized fangs, a sudden weight settled against his legs. Go Cheng Chung was wrapped around them like a koala. Wild. But excuse me, there's some absolutely beautiful art that you must be absorbing. Please take a moment to absorb the beauty. Oh shit. I'm looking at the back cover of the book, obviously. And I'd forgotten that Faraway Wanderers was a priest thing. It recommends, it plugs other things that, she's written. Huh, how did I forget that Faraway Wanderers was a priest thing? Anyway, more important things happening. Get my face out of here. Thank you. Save me, the young officer who had moments ago vowed to protect Shen Wei was now holding on for dear life. He was shaking, his face a puddle of snot and tears, but was still able to yell something he'd been holding in all day. Ghost! There's a ghost! The little ghost had died, young enough that her intellect hadn't been fully developed. The mere sight of people was a thrill, and this was a tremendously entertaining development. She let go of Daching at once and giddily floated over to Go Cheng Chung, finding this bear-hugging man highly interesting. When Go Cheng Chung cracked his eyes open and risked a peek down, the girl stuck out her tongue and rolled her eyes back. With her face still tilted upward, her head spun 360 degrees on her neck, leaving it dangling in mid-air while still connected perilously to her body. Sure. Go Cheng Chung's eyes rolled back into his skull a full 3 times, but he gasped for half a minute without managing to pass out. He seemed to take Shen Wei for a real tree, hugging his legs tightly and attempting to climb. A scream arose from the pit of his stomach. Ghost! Shen Wei sighed and held onto the waistband of his pants to keep Go Cheng Chung from dragging them down and costing him his dignity. He even managed to see the strange humor of the situation, caught between the hunger ghost clawing at the door behind him and a little ghost girl dangling her head in front of him. By the time... Ooh, sneeze. Pardon me, that doesn't happen very often. By the time Zhao Yunlan was only a dozen meters into the hospital, his watch, Clarity, looked like it had been dyed with blood. The watch's hands deviated from their usual course and started spinning wildly like a compass needle, but no matter how it tried, it couldn't settle on anything. The sheer number of impurities was interfering too badly. Hey, fake monk. My stupid watch is acting up again, Zhao Yunlan yelled to Lin Jing. If you've got any tricks, hurry up and use them. We've got people waiting for us to save their lives. Lin Jing promptly sat cross-legged on the floor. Closing his eyes, he started counting his Buddhist prayer beads. His lips moved steadily as he recited scriptures, for all the world like an old monk meditating. Then his eyes snapped back open. Got it. The sandalwood beads in his hands rustled. Face blank, he stood and pointed in one direction, every inch the confident charlatan. This way. Zhao Yunlan immediately headed in that direction. How come you were so fast this time? Behind him, Lin Jing spoke in his unique, leisurely way. They're both young men, so their yang energy is naturally abundant. Even with Da Ching's black cat yin energy with them, they stand out from this place's ocean of raging yin energy. Zhao Yunlan froze. Only 2 men? What about the girl? There's a girl? Oh, then she's not with them. Zhao Yunlan frowned. It was hard for him to say what Go Chang Chung would do in this situation, but Da Ching was there. Lazy and gluttonous the cat might be, but he still had some professional ethics. Besides, Shen Lao She was with them. That's not possible, he replied reflexively. There's no way Shen Wei would leave a student behind. They had only met by chance, but he was certain Shen Wei wasn't the sort of coward who'd abandon his student. Who's Shen Wei? Lin Jing asked. Isn't the new kid's last name Guo? Zhao Yunlan couldn't be bothered to explain. No one you know. Lin Jing said. The last time you brushed me off like this, you were dressed up like a suave asshole going off to see the prettiest girl at your university. Every time you get stingy with details and hide something, it means you've definitely met a beauty. Will you at least tell me if this Shen Wei is a man or a woman? Red to fucking filth. Oh, damn. Zhao Yunlan found dead in a hospital. Who? Amitabha, form is emptiness, Zhao Yunlan threw back at him darkly. Lin Jing had nothing to say to that. Zhao Yunlan entered the dark, narrow hallway and held up his lighter to survey his surroundings. The hallways branched in all directions like the deathly silent maze of a trapdoor spider's nest. Why did Lin Jing think Li Qian wasn't with Shen Wei and the others? Had they really had a reason to leave the girl behind, or did they only think they'd brought her along with them? At that moment, in a corner of the storage room, Li Qian's eyes opened. You know, the second he said that he couldn't pick up that Li Qian was even, with them, you knew something was wrong? But that's, somehow worse. That's the end of the chapter, by the way. We're on page 137 for chapter 10. Whew. Go Chang Chung heard a noise. Turning to look, he saw that Li Qian had gotten up entirely without assistance. There was something awkward and disjointed about her movements, almost like a marionette. It was indescribably creepy. But she'd just woken up and the drugs she'd been given could still be affecting her, so Go Chang Chung didn't think too much of it. He even let out a sigh of relief. Li Tongshui, thank God, you're finally awake. Li Qian didn't answer. She only stood there, staring at him blankly. It dawned on Go Chang Chung that something wasn't quite right. Li Tongshui? He took a step forward, only to be stopped by Shen Wei's outstretched arm. And then Li Qian smiled. Her mouth split into an uncanny curve as a strange gurgling came from her throat. The motion of her shoulders was slow and clumsy, as if they'd rested. Her entire body swayed in place a few times. But just as Go Chang Chung began to wonder if she'd been paralyzed, she rushed forward, inhumanly quick. It was Shen Wei who'd placed himself between her and Go Chang Chung, whom Li Qian ran into, hitting his chest like a firecracker. She immediately attempted to take a bite out of his shoulder. The phone's light fell across her face, showing rows of crooked teeth in her gaping mouth. With her nose scrunched up and her eyes so wide that the whites showed all around her irises, she looked like a grotesque, fanged monster. Oh no, she's been possessed by a malevolent spirit. Da Qing's black fur stood on end. First she summoned a hunger ghost, and now a malevolent spirit? Shen Lao She, what is up with your student? Why is she such an impurity magnet? Go Chang Chung's head emptied of everything but a faint buzz. Acting on pure instinct, he whacked at Li Qian with both his hands and feet, using all sorts of bizarre techniques, pulling her hair and scratching at her face. He might have even wanted to pounce and sink his teeth into her. One of his doggy paddle-style attacks got lucky. He managed to hit her in the face hard enough that her head snapped back. In his wild panic, he even stepped on her a few times. Despite this heroic display, Go Chang Chung carried on in his own idiotic style, yelling through the omnipresent snot and tears, "Don't come near me! Don't come near me! Help! Don't come near me!" To Shen Wei, caught between them, it seemed the situation could hardly get any more chaotic. He could only push Go Chang Chung away with one hand and fend Li Qian off with the other, twisting her arm behind her. Li Qian seemed completely feral, flailing and biting at everything her mouth could reach. Shen Wei freed one hand to grab her by the back of the neck, then turned and pinned her against the wall, seizing her hands. Commotion reigned within and without. Inside the storage room there was a strange hissing girl, a little ghost girl wrapped around the leg of a young officer whose nose and eyes were constantly streaming, and a yelling, cursing black cat. Outside, a monster relentlessly clawed at the door. Even Shen Wei's preternatural calm couldn't keep him from being swept up in the chaos of it all. "Someone get me a rope so I can tie her up," he said. But everyone was too busy crying or cursing to pay him any attention. Shen Wei was obliged to raise his voice, patience wearing thin as he turned to Go Cheng Chung. "Stop crying, Officer Xiaogo. That little thing doesn't bite. Please, come give me a hand." As if to illustrate his point, the little ghost girl opened her mouth, which had only 3 teeth left, and chomped down on Go Cheng Chung's thigh. Go Cheng Chung immediately keened like a dolphin, earning himself a slap on the forehead from the cat, who had jumped onto him. "Fool, take a closer look!" Go Cheng Chung obediently opened his eyes just a sliver to look down, and realized the little ghost's teeth and hands had gone right through him. She couldn't even touch him. Li Qian began to struggle harder. Shen Wei was on the verge of a cold sweat from wrangling the useless duo. "Officer Xiaogo!" Go Cheng Chung scrambled up from the floor and whipped off his own belt. He helped Shen Wei tie Li Qian up, all the while squeezing his legs together to keep his pants from slipping down. It looked as if he were trying to hold in the urge to pee. Just then, the old lady, who'd been gone for some time, reappeared. She floated off to the side, barely visible and seeming much weaker. She was clearly too frantic to touch Li Qian, but her hand kept passing through the girl's body. With each attempt, she became a little more transparent. Go Cheng Chung couldn't help trying to stop her. "Granny," but his hand went right through her. When the old lady looked back at him, Go Cheng Chung saw her face clearly. She had deep smile lines and pronounced bags under her eyes, and her sparse white hair was poorly secured with a fake bun, revealing an ugly, dry scalp. The wrinkles on her forehead weighed down the corners of her eyes until they drooped, squished into triangles. Her eyeballs were murky. She seemed desperate to communicate, but no sound came out of her mouth. As her efforts at touching anything proved futile, desperation turned into despair. But gradually she calmed down. She looked at Li Qian blankly and simply stood there, at a loss for what to do. Finally, soundlessly, she began to cry. Her tears were as murky as her eyes, like mud-tinged rainwater. Go Cheng Chung could only stand there uselessly. He gave Shen Luoshe and Da Qing a helpless look, then pointed at Li Qian. What exactly is wrong with her?" Shen Wei's head was bowed. It was impossible to know what he was thinking. Da Qing humphed. "She's been possessed by something impure, but bugs don't feed when there's no rot. If she's possessed but you're fine, that means she's even worse off than you." Go Cheng Chung couldn't tell if that was praise or insult, but he had no time to ponder it. There was a great screech as a huge hole was ripped through the small door of the storage room, and a mantis sickle claw reached in. Shen Wei ducked tidily, pushing Li Qian to the side as he moved. The Hunger Ghost's claw slashed past him, just barely grazing his scalp. Then the door tore completely open, revealing the Hunger Ghost in all its grotesquerie. The thing seemed to have gained a full ton of mass since they'd last seen it. It threw itself at the living creatures inside the storage room, passing through Li Qian's grandma. The old lady's soul didn't have time to dodge, and the contact vaporized her. Only her shocked, frightened expression seemed to linger. Da Qing roared, "Get out of the way!" Go Cheng Chung fell on his ass as Da Qing leaped up to a high place. The cat's body abruptly doubled in size, and his eyes turned to piercing gold, like a little leopard. An inaudible sound wave flowed from his mouth, carrying an invisible energy aimed straight for the Hunger Ghost charging around the tiny room. The energy was palpable. It sliced past Go Cheng Chung's face like a blade, making him fear for the safety of his nose. The Hunger Ghost was hurled into the air and slammed against the wall. In the dim light, Shen Wei and the others could see tiny cracks from the impact. The Hunger Ghost abruptly stopped moving, like a gecko nailed to the wall. In the next moment, Da Qing's body dwindled to its normal kitty size. He stumbled forward a few steps before going still and toppling from his high perch. Shen Wei quickly reached out to catch him. The black cat looked at him as if on the verge of death. He subconsciously rubbed his face against Shen Wei's hand, then closed his eyes and was still. Go Cheng Chung quaked with terror, sure that the cat had died. It wasn't until he saw the regular rise and fall of his furry belly as Shen Wei smoothed a hand over it that he realized Da Qing had only fallen asleep. "What do we do?" asked Go Cheng Chung, dragging himself upright. But before Shen Wei could answer, there was an earth-shattering roar of fury. Yet again, Go Cheng Chung's ass met the floor. The two of them simultaneously looked toward the flattened Hunger Ghost in shock, only to find that it no longer resembled the dumpling wrapper slapped onto the wall. It had reinflated itself. Countless globs of shadow like low-grade cotton were being sucked in from the hallway and into the hunger ghost's wide mouth. Its stomach ballooned rapidly until its roundness let it roll off the wall. The hunger ghost landed easily on its stick legs, still reminiscent of a huge mantis. It even swayed a little as it walked. Then it shook its head and opened its mouth, a full 180 degrees, like a watermelon cut in half. No, thank you. As the room filled with a terrifying sound of wind, Go Cheng Chung felt his feet sliding forward of their own volition. He looked back, astounded, and realized Shen Wei was getting farther from him by the second. "I'm being sucked in!" Go Cheng Chung's voice changed pitch. Somehow, embroiled in such absolute chaos, a metaphor popped into his head. "It's sucking me up like jelly in a vacuum pack! I'm going to be eaten!" With great difficulty, Go Cheng Chung twisted and began to doggy paddle in midair, movements contorted. As he tried to reach for Shen Wei, jumbled words spilled out of his mouth. I'm a police officer! I'm going to be eaten! I'm a police..." He'd completely forgotten about using those very words to encourage himself. But it appeared that even the hunger ghost thought this particular morsel was too noisy. It roared again. It was as if an invisible hand clamped around Go Cheng Chung's neck, abruptly cutting off his voice. He shook his head desperately, neck extended as he instinctively clawed at it. Veins protruded on the back of his hand, and a horrific sound came from his throat, like a leaky old bellows. Then Shen Wei grabbed his hand and held on with such unexpected strength that Go Cheng Chung feared he might be ripped apart. Da Qing was unconscious. Li Qian was still struggling on the floor, eyes glazed over. The hunger ghost was sizing them all up as prey, while an array of little ghosts leered at them. Things could hardly be worse. Then a whistle suddenly carved the darkness open, stabbing at their eardrums. An expression of utter horror crossed the little ghost girl's face. At some point she had hidden herself in the corner. Now she screamed silently, dove into the floor, and disappeared. A moment later, a pitch-black dagger cut through the air. It flew between Go Cheng Chung and the hunger ghost as though cutting an invisible rope. Something seemed to shove the hunger ghost, slamming it against the wall. The force pulling Go Cheng Chung stopped so abruptly that momentum sent him crashing into Shen Wei. He fell to the floor, landing on his back, and might have brought Shen Laoshe down with him, had someone not caught Shen Wei. Zhao Yunlan had an arm around Shen Wei's waist, drawing him half a step to the side. The lighter's glow illuminated his face, handsome and cold with sculpted, if slightly gaunt, features. His eyes gleamed from bottomless shadows, reflecting the tiny flame. Zhao Yunlan, the deceptive wolf, held this pose and deliberately deepened his voice. Gazing into Shen Wei's eyes, he murmured, "Shen Laoshe, are you all right?" Not a thought was spared for the little intern wailing at his feet. For a few seconds, Zhao Yunlan thought Shen Wei's expression was understandably dazed, but compared to Go Cheng Chung, the well-mannered Shen Laoshe was the epitome of calm and collected. He recovered in no time at all. Then he looked down, removed a certain someone's wandering hands from his waist, and pushed his glasses up. "I'm fine, thank you." Go Cheng Chung had never been so overjoyed at anyone's arrival in his life. Still kneeling, he stretched out his neck and screamed, "Director Zhao, save me!" His appearance was as comical as it was wretched. Zhao Yunlan quickly assessed the little room, ascertained that there had been no casualties, and relaxed. Even in the midst of it all, he managed a jokingly theatrical tone. "What woes have befallen you, good folk? Quickly now, have you written an account? Share it with me, that I may know of your tribulations." Go Cheng Chung flattened himself fully against the floor. Shen Wei reached up and rubbed the bridge of his nose to hide the beginnings of a smile. There's ridiculous, and then there's the person who falls in love with ridiculous. You know what I mean? Then the re-defeated hunger ghost got up yet again, as if it was set to automatically respawn. Shen Wei's head snapped up as the creature waved its giant claws and charged at Zhao Yunlan's back. "Watch out!" Zhao Yunlan twisted his body to the side. One huge claw after the other swiped just past his face with a faint, icy wind. He crossed his forearms above his head to block the attack with his short blade, then grabbed the Hunger Ghost's wrist. The quick, powerful movements betrayed well-trained precision and sharpness. There was still a smile in his eyes when they met the Hunger Ghost's, and his dimples were still visible. But something about that smile was chilling. A deep male voice rang out behind the Hunger Ghost. "Namo Abitaba." There was a distant sound of a large bell being struck, a reverberation that seemed to travel along one's bones and all the way to the soul. Go Cheng-Chung felt a ringing in his head and saw stars. Meanwhile, Li Qian, who had been struggling against her bonds the whole time, suddenly stiffened and went still. The Hunger Ghost reacted as if shot in the head. It flung its head back with an agonized scream, shedding clouds of black shadow. By the time Zhao Yunlan let go, the ghost had been reduced to the size of a skeletal human, stomach bulging. It was as weak as a shadow that a breeze could blow away. Only then did Zhao Yunlan lazily take out a palm-sized glass bottle. There was a cold gleam on the bottle's lip. The Hunger Ghost shivered violently as if wanting to flee, but Lin Jing stood behind it, blocking the door. Pressing his palms together, he deftly formed a... Vajra? Vahra. I'm not entirely sure how soft or how hard this J is. Formed a Vajra seal. Suddenly, this average-looking man became an immovable presence. The Hunger Ghost was shoved back from the doorway, unable to pass. Zhao Yunlan had already removed the cork stopper, aiming the bottle's opening at the Hunger Ghost. Instantly, the Hunger Ghost's large, bald head contorted into Munch's painting, The Scream. With a hysterical display worthy of being immortalized in art, the monster was sucked inside. The clear glass turned black. Zhao Yunlan screwed the cork back in tightly and held the screwed prison with its terrible lack of amenities up to his ear. He gave it a few rough shakes, then cheerfully said, "That's that," to Lin Jing, still behind him. Da Qing regained enough consciousness to crack his eyes open. As if with his dying breath, he said, "You guys used violence to uphold the law again. I couldn't sleep through all the racket." Zhao Yunlan stuffed the complaining cat into his briefcase. But Da Qing was undeterred. In a weak, thready voice, he asked, "What took you so long?" Traffic on the southeast side of the second ring road was a nightmare. Zhao Yunlan patted his furry head. "Later, I'll give you a bonus for all your hard work. Just go to sleep now." Da Qing's eyes drooped shut, but the nagging continued as if he were talking in his sleep. I want to eat pan-fried little croakers." Zhao Yunlan had nothing to say in response. Go Cheng-Chung gave Zhao Yunlan a bewildered look. Is that it?" Zhao Yunlan's expression was shadowed with impatience, but he remembered Shen Wei's presence in time not to fuck up his good-tempered act. Rearranging his features into a smile, he said, "Just about." As he spoke, he walked past Go Cheng-Chung and touched Shen Wei's elbow. "You're really not injured? I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. We should still go get you checked out." Shen Wei allowed Zhao Yunlan to take his hand, completely unguarded. He broke off, expression going blank, and lost consciousness. He fell right into Zhao Yunlan's waiting arms. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Zhao Yunlan caught him effortlessly and then, half kneeling, slipped one arm under the crook of his knees. Leaning close to Shen Wei's ear, he quietly said, "Today, a female student named Li Qian attempted suicide by jumping off a building, but she was unsuccessful. You took her to the hospital where a doctor saw that your blood sugar was low and kept you here for a day for observation. Also, back when you lived in the Twin Towers when a series of suicides occurred there, you saw Officer Zhao Yunlan, who was in charge of the case. It turned out that the victims belonged to a cult and it was a mass suicide. Despite the rumors, there was nothing supernatural about it. Remember that." With a significant look at Zhao Yunlan, Lin Jing pointed at Li Qian. Zhao Yunlan continued murmuring into Shen Wei's ear. "As for Li Qian, she's involved with a murder case, so the police took her in for questioning. You don't remember anything else." Shenwei's glasses were askew and had slid down his nose, revealing the exquisite lines of his eyes and brows. He was completely insensible, head pillowed on Zhao Yunlan's shoulder. Zhao Yunlan leaned down, picked him up, and walked out. They literally combined one of my not really favorite tropes with one of my favorite tropes, so I don't know what to feel. For some reason, and this just shows you how subjective and subjectively silly preferences and brains are, because for some reason, falling, the whole one person falling into another person's arms thing, unless under very specific unless it's under very specific circumstances, kind of like here actually, where he's literally doing something and it's not like some grand, overly orchestrated coincidence, right? I'm not a big fan of the falling into each other's arms thing, but man, you give me a good like bridal carry or fireman carry or hey, let me hop on your back and I'm gone. It's so silly. There's no reason why one, I'm like, and the other one, I'm like, give it to me anytime, anywhere. Who can say? Lin Jing lifted Li Qian and slung her over his shoulder. After a few steps, noticing that Go Changcheng hadn't budged, he turned back and asked politely, Benefactor. Benefactor comes with a footnote. Benefactor is a form of address monks use for the general public. Thank you. Now if only I could find where the heck there it is. Benefactor, this humble monk has another shoulder. Do you need to be carried out as well? No. Go Changcheng said numbly. No, thank you. Lin Jing held up a hand in front of his chest and bowed his head. Amitabha, you're welcome. With that, he strolled out of the room. At some point, all the nurses on duty had reappeared. Zhao Yunlan carefully avoided them as he took Shen Wei back to Li Qian's room, where he removed the man's glasses thoughtfully and set them aside. Then Zhao Yunlan tucked him into bed and turned the heat up. I've been doing that a lot this session. Just blankly staring into the camera. But, like, what else do you want from me? What else can I do if not just The Office, this situation? After a moment's thought, he took hold of Shen Laoshe's right hand and drew an invisible calming charm on the back of it with his forefinger. That done, he grinned smugly and planted a light kiss in the same spot. You see what I mean? What am I supposed to say with that? What else is there to do but stare at you for a second? Having allowed himself this indulgence, he said gleefully, Good night, Sleeping Beauty. When I'm done with the case, I'll ask you out properly. Let's go. He waved to Lin Jing and Go Changcheng. We're expecting an honored guest at midnight and can't keep him waiting. Time to go back and wrap this up. After the sound of their receding footsteps had completely faded down the hall, Shen Wei, who should have been sound asleep, opened his eyes. He sat up, all traces of sleepiness gone. Raising his right hand, he slid a finger gently along the skin, revealing a soft golden charm. He stared at it for a while, his gaze tender, but the subconscious smile at the corners of his lips was all too fleeting. His brows had knit together again as though he were worried or perhaps in pain. Shen Wei muttered something under his breath, and the golden charm lifted lightly from his hand like a slip of paper floating in midair. He caught it tightly and carefully stowed it away. Then he rose, straightened up the hospital bed, and leapt easily from the second-floor window, vanishing into the night without a trace. he was conscious for that. He was conscious for that whole little ask out moment that just happened. That was the end of the chapter, by the way. And we're actually right around perfect timing for the break time. So I'll be back. We're on page 149 for chapter 11, by the way. I will repeat that when we come back. We're going to take a few minutes. I need to get some more tea. Stand up, walk around, grab a snack, do something, take care of yourselves just a little bit. And I will be back in just a little while for chapter 11. Welcome back. Alrighty. Let me get my face out of the way. And we can continue now that just things are happening. Questions are being asked. Well, we'll get there. Dates are being not made, but like pre-made. Like I haven't asked you out, but I'm gonna. Stop. Just absolutely fucking stop. Page 149. Chapter 11. It was nearly midnight when Zhao Yunlan and the others got back to 4 Bright Avenue, so Lao Wu was once again the doorman on duty. At the sight of Go Cheng-chung, Lao Wu opened his large, fierce mouth and greeted him enthusiastically. "Hey, Xiaogo, you're back! How did your first assignment go?" Compared to an evening of being chased by the Hunger Ghost, scurrying and clamoring all over the place, Lao Wu's papier-mâché face seemed downright kind. Go Cheng-chung smiled weakly and kept his real feelings to himself. It was great. Lao Wu laughed, bright and clear. "It's okay if you're not used to it at first. Work hard and learn. You're alive. You have potential." For the first time, Go Cheng-chung realized that even he had an advantage in this workforce. He was alive. Zhao Yunlan motioned to Lin Jing. I almost did Jinling again. To Lin Jing and Go Cheng-chung to go on ahead with Li Qian. He parked, checked the time, and then spoke to Lao Wu privately. "You know about this case, right? An escapee from the other side? Since we only have the authority to make the arrest but not to interrogate or pass judgment, the sole executing emissary will be stopping by personally. Please make sure to welcome him." Taken aback, Lao Wu unconsciously stood taller and lowered his voice. That lord?" Nodding, Zhao Yunlan patted him on the shoulder. Then, somewhat tired, he lit a cigarette to wake himself up a little before walking into the office. Lao Wu didn't dare go back into the gatehouse to sit and read the newspaper. Like a soldier standing guard, he stood at attention at the entrance. Zhao Yunlan waved at Go Cheng-chung and led him into the office. Pointing at a new desk, he said offhandedly, "That's your spot. Ordinarily, if nothing unusual comes up, the workday is from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We don't do card punching. If you're occasionally late or need to leave early, just let me know. When and if you come to work depends entirely on your self-discipline. Lunch hours from noon to 1 p.m. The cafeteria is on the second floor, and employees eat and drink for free. You get paid vacation time, and your comprehensive benefits will be set up shortly. Everything is included, so don't worry." Having said all that, Zhao Yunlan also, great gig. Having said all that, Zhao Yunlan took a bank card from his pocket and handed it to Go Cheng-chung. "The default PIN is 6 ones. Change it yourself at the ATM. Your salary and bonuses will all be deposited to the account on this card. Payday is the 15th of each lunar month, and your first month's pay is already in this account. If you need to be reimbursed for travel or work expenses, that's through Wangzheng. Just fill out the reimbursement form during the day and attach your receipts, then leave it on her desk. Ask the others how to fill it out. She'll take care of it overnight, and in the morning you can get the money from her desk." Overnight? Sign me up. I'm as big a coward as Go Cheng-chung. Sign me up. Go Cheng-chung accepted the salary card with both hands. In that moment, he forgot about the terrifying woman whose head was sewn onto her neck. Instead, he felt an inexplicable pride. A salary card. Proof that he truly had his first job. I have an income now," he stammered, eyes bright. A dumbass on top of being a money lover? Interesting combination. Zhao Yunlan smiled wryly. "You're a nepotism baby, and your uncle's a government official. You're not hurting for money, so why the excitement?" Go Cheng-chung looked up, face serious. "I have a use for it. I really do." But what that use was, he didn't say. He just carefully tucked the pay card into his wallet like some rare treasure. Zhao Yunlan was about to say something else when a snow-white light flashed across Go Cheng-chung's body. Zhao Yunlan looked on in shock. How does this brat have so many merits? Merits as a footnote. Spiritual merits accumulate through doing good deeds in life. The more merits you have, the better your karma, which will affect how good your next life will be. How does this brat have so many merits, he wondered. Because of his ancestors' blessings, maybe? Or was he someone impressive in a past life? He stubbed out his cigarettes, narrowed his eyes, and looked the overjoyed Go Cheng Chung up and down. Then he pointed at the director's office across the hall. I'm usually over there. If you need anything, just knock. He scrubbed a hand over his face, drawing Go Cheng Chung's attention to the dark circles under his eyes. Grabbing a chair at random, Zhao Yunlan sat, sprawling forward on the table like a dead dog. I'm taking a nap. Wake me when he's here. Go Cheng Chung had no idea who he was, but at least Lin Jing was there too. The poor intern hadn't shut his eyes in 24 hours and had been under non-stop stress. It wasn't long at all before he drifted off in the thoroughly air-conditioned office. His nap seemed very brief. Go Cheng Chung jolted back awake and instantly felt an indescribable chill. It was an uncanny kind of cold. The very air seemed motionless. At some point, the office AC had stopped putting out cold air when the temperature plummeted in the entire building. There were even white specks of frost on the windows. The ghost employees stopped bustling around and stood politely with their heads bowed as if lining up to welcome someone important. Zhao Yunlan had also woken up at some point and was now sitting up straight, pouring hot tea into 4 cups set in front of him. Seeing Lin Jing cautiously get to his feet, Go Cheng Chung, who had no clue what was going on, followed his lead and stood up too. There was a faint noise as the climate control automatically shifted into heating mode. Then unhurried footsteps rang out in the empty hallway and came to a stop outside the criminal investigation unit. The door opened as Lao Wu led someone inside, radiating respect that bordered on deference. He escorted the guest all the way into the office, bowed, and pulled a chair out. During all of this, he didn't even dare raise his head. My lord, this way, please, he said. My thanks, the guest said politely. It was a man's voice, tremendously pleasant to the ear. His tone was gentle and courteous, with a solemn note that made people unthinkingly lower their heads. Perhaps Go Cheng Chung still wasn't fully awake. Everyone around him was frozen in place, but he did something truly audacious. He gathered his courage and looked up to sneak a peek at their visitor. The guest's slim body was entirely wrapped in a black robe that hid even his hands and feet, and his face was concealed by a veil of black mist. Nothing else could be discerned through all the inky blackness. He first stopped at the door, then bowed to Zhao Yunlan from a distance, hands together. His long sleeves swept the tops of his feet as he spoke. My apologies for the disturbance. Zhao Yunlan held up a yellow paper talisman, lit it, and let the ashes fall into a cup of hot tea. The ashes dissolved in an instant, taking all the heat from the cup with them. In the same moment, a steaming cup appeared in the black-robed man's hands. No rush. The journey here must have been freezing. Please make yourself comfortable, Lord Executing Emissary, Zhao Yunlan said. Have a hot drink to warm your hands. Go Cheng Chung, having watched Zhao Yunlan burn the talisman to pass the tea, couldn't keep the words, burning spirit money to send it to the dead, from floating through his mind. And then his high-strung nerves processed what Zhao Yunlan had just said. Freezing, he thought, confused. How could the hottest days of the year be freezing? Where did this person even come from? A sudden memory made him shiver violently. When he'd been young, his grandma had talked to him about death. She had been very clear that when the elderly move on, one has to make sure that they're fed and warm. Otherwise, the intense cold during their long journey on the Huangquan something like that, Huangquan Road. I'm gonna write that down real quick. Hey, sorry. Huangquan. That should be rather close. That comes with a footnote, by the way. The Huangquan, or Yellow Springs, are a body of water in the netherworld where spirits go when they die. Thus, the road from the mortal realm to the ghost realm is the Huangquan Road. Whoa, sorry. I did it again. What is it with me and footnotes? I swear to God. I read a footnote, I turn a page. I don't know why. Otherwise, the intense cold during their long journey on the Huangquan Road could pierce the very soul. Was it possible that their visitor was... With his head lowered, the soul executing emissary took a sip. This is good tea. Thank you. Then he walked past Go Cheng Chung and sat in the chair across from Zhao Yunlan. As he passed by, Go Cheng Chung caught a scent. It wasn't the rotting smell they'd encountered at the hospital. It wasn't foul at all. It was a very light fragrance that reminded Go Cheng Chung of midwinter at the foot of the Daxianling Mountains, far to the north. It was the scent that accompanies the first breath when you push open the door and walk out into the morning after a whole night of snow. It was the scent of endless, eternally unmelting snow, pure and impossibly cold, tinged with the last fragrance of dying blossoms. The scent carried far into the distance, all the way to the end of the road of life. The soul-executing emissary spoke softly and eloquently, like a scholar in a period drama. Objectively, other than the eerie black mist concealing his face, he was unremarkable. But as Go Cheng Chung came fully awake, he was filled with an unforgettable fear, a fear that was baseless and irrational, but rooted him in his very soul. Go Cheng Chung finally understood why the sight of this man had made the ghosts in the hall react like mice seeing a cat. He obviously came from the southern hemisphere, Go Cheng Chung told himself. It's winter there right now. He shut his eyes, too afraid to keep looking at the soul-executing emissary, and tried to comfort himself with the logic of core socialist values. Have faith in science, freedom, democracy, harmony. My son. My sweet, innocent, dumb, husky son. There were 4 people in the office, including ghosts. The black cat was dead to the world, so he didn't count. So Zhao Yunlan had poured 4 cups of hot tea. But even after its fragrance permeated the entire office, neither Lin Jing nor Go Cheng Chung dared to step forward and take a cup. Only Zhao Yunlan sat calmly behind the table. After the soul-executing emissary had finished the entire cup of tea in peace, Zhao Yunlan finally asked, "Why did my lord personally come to deal with the mere runaway hunger ghost?" "For a few reasons," the emissary replied. "The significant prison break in the netherworld during the Ghost Festival was due to a certain object resurfacing in the mortal realm." A light bulb went off in Zhao Yunlan's head. "The reincarnation dial?" The emissary nodded. "Ah, so the Guardian already knows." "That is correct. The reincarnation dial, one of the 4 hallowed artifacts of the netherworld, had been lost for a long time. It is too soon now to know whether its sudden reappearance in the mortal realm will lead to fortune or calamity. I cannot allow its presence to go unchecked, so I came to see to the matter myself." Zhao Yunlan had further questions. What exactly are these 4 hallowed artifacts of the netherworld? The emissary paused. "A seal." "A seal?" "Legend describes them as a great seal tied to the balance of yin and yang in the 6 paths of reincarnation." Footnote. The 6 paths of reincarnation are 6 different realms of existence where a soul may enter each new life. Gods, demigods, humans, animals, violent ghosts, and hell. I want to do it again. Thank you. Word of this seal has been passed down since time immemorial, and many sources that speak of it can no longer be verified. It may be real, or the stories may have been exaggerated over time. Regardless, the fact remains that living and dead souls alike are irresistibly drawn to the reincarnation dial due to its life-lending properties. It has already disrupted the order of reincarnation. If it falls into the hands of someone with ulterior motives, the results will be worse than we can imagine. No wonder Lian had attracted both a hunger ghost and a malevolent spirit, having touched the reincarnation dial. Zhao Yunlan's expression became serious. Standing up, he said, "I'll take you to the interrogation room next door." The soul-executing emissary followed, moving silently. Surrounded by humans and ghosts, struck dumb by fear, he spoke as if making small talk. "The Guardian looks somewhat unwell. You must be working tirelessly day and night due to our folly. You should consider your health." Zhao Yunlan waved lazily. "It's fine. Pulling an occasional all-nighter won't kill me. And even if it did, it'd still be fine. I can go work for the netherworld and keep coasting along as a government official." The emissary clearly disagreed. Life and death are of the greatest importance. The guardian must not joke so carelessly. Zhao Yunlan gave him an unworried smile and pushed open the interrogation room door. All right. Wolf's comment kind of got me there. Death, in fact, be hot. Li Qian, who had been locked in the interrogation room, had regained consciousness at some point and had been shrieking ever since. But the moment the soul-executing emissary entered, the shriek cut off. When Li Qian saw the emissary, she reacted like a hen grabbed by the neck. Her entire body trembled, and she stared, petrified, at the doorway. Then her eyes rolled back into their sockets, and she collapsed bonelessly. Go Cheng-chung, following along behind, felt something fly straight at his face. He took a panicked step back. The emissary raised an arm directly in front of him, the large sleeve carving a huge black arc through the air. The hazy silhouette of a ghost manifested in midair. A long-haired woman in a long, tattered dress. Her face was contorted, and she writhed, screaming endlessly in distress. In an instant, she was torn into black smoke and sucked into the emissary's sleeve. Refused to see the error of her ways and attempted to take permanent possession of a living body, the emissary said mildly. The punishment is execution. He spoke in the exact same gentle tone he'd used when exchanging pleasantries. Go Cheng-chung shuddered. Zhao Yunlan seemed oblivious, as if this were a regular occurrence. He turned to the side and made an inviting gesture. 4 chairs had been brought into the room, and Li Qian was tied up next to the table, her face pale. Lin Jing walked up to her with a spray bottle used for watering plants. With no more concern for the girl than he might show a skeleton, he spritzed her in the face with cold water. He clearly wasn't going to go easy on her just because she was a woman. When she slowly came to, he said, poker-faced, "We're the police. We have some questions for you. You need to answer truthfully. If you don't, there will be consequences." Li Qian's eyes were glassy. She gave a great shudder as she looked around. When she recognized Go Cheng-chung and Zhao Yunlan, she started to say something, then realized she was tied to the chair. Looking at the rope in shock, she asked, What happened to me?" Compared to Lin Jing, Zhao Yunlan could have been a public spokesperson on TV. He seemed far more personable and spoke gently from beside Lin Jing. "We've apprehended the person who attacked you and murdered your fellow student. Now we need you to assist us in corroborating the account of the incident by giving us a routine statement. That's okay, isn't it?" Nothing about the situation seemed like they were taking a routine statement. It felt far more like an official interrogation. Li Qian was no fool. She froze for a moment, then quickly got herself under control. "Then why do you need to tie me up?" Zhao Yunlan raised an eyebrow, then snapped his fingers. The ropes fell off as if sound activated. Li Qian was startled, but looked up and feigned calm under Zhao Yunlan's scrutiny. She still couldn't keep herself from edging back even as she bluffed. "If you've caught the culprit, what can you possibly need to ask me? I've already told you everything I know. What time is it now? I want to go home." Lin Jing pounded the table, playing the bad cop role to the hilt. "Stop bullshitting and answer our questions. Or are you trying to cover up for them? What's your motive? What's your connection to them?" With Lin Jing playing the bad guy, it was Zhao Yunlan's role to put a light hand on his shoulder as if restraining him. Amiably, he asked, "On August 31st, at 10:20 p.m., you ran into the victim, Lu Romei, outside the school entrance. You saw the thing following her. We've already confirmed all of this and have a general idea of what happened, but I still have a few questions. To start with, when did you first begin seeing them? Was it after you touched that sundial from your hometown? The one with the reincarnation cycle carved into it?" Li Qian gave Lin Jing a wary glance, then looked down and surrendered to the inevitable. She nodded quickly. Zhao Yunlan's slender fingers wrapped lightly on the table. "Rumor has it that the reincarnation dial's base is made from the 3 life rock, and the back is inlaid with the scales of a black fish from the Wangchuan River. It can bring back the dead, pulling someone who's already died back to the world of the living. But a living person exchanging their life for someone dead is like dipping your hand into the waters of the Huangquan. Ever since then, the yin and yang worlds have overlapped in your vision, haven't they?" Li Qian's shoulders trembled slightly. He stared at Zhao Yunlan's finger and nodded in silence. She stared at Zhao Yunlan's finger and nodded in silence. Zhao Yunlan leaned back in his chair. "What a good filial child you are." His eyes slid half closed. Can I speak today? His eyes slid half closed. Thick eyelashes and deep eye sockets made his gaze look a little hazy. Almost sighing, he said, "So many people pay lip service to the principle of when at home be filial, when outside be respectful. But how many youths in their prime, when confronted with the reincarnation dial, would really be able to give their life for someone else?" At this, the soul-executing emissary spoke up. "The reincarnation dial is among the netherworld's 4 hallowed artifacts. It can disrupt the balance of yin and yang. It's not meant for mortal use." Like everyone else, Lian was too afraid to look up at the emissary. Her fingers twisted together as he spoke, and she pieced her reply together with great difficulty. I didn't know what it was. I just heard that it was an old relic that grants wishes. When my grandma had a sudden cerebral hemorrhage, I was at school, so no one was there to notice. By the time someone found her, it was too late to treat her. By the time I saw her, she had already... Back then, she wasn't just someone I happened to live with. My parents both saw me as a spare. She's the one who brought me up. We depended on each other. Do you understand what that feels like? I couldn't even cry. I couldn't even convince myself she was gone. How could she die? How can someone just die? "So you found the reincarnation dial," Zhao Yunlan said. "I thought I was crazy, too, believing in something like that. But that it really responded," Lian muttered. "What did I have to be scared of? I'm still so young. I could even live to be 100. I could give her 50 years and still live until retirement. With so many years left in my life, why couldn't I give some to her? If mortals shouldn't touch stuff from the netherworld, then why did it happen to be there? Why did it respond to my wish?" Her question made everyone fall silent. Eventually, it was the soul-executing emissary who spoke. "Because at that moment, you sincerely wanted her alive again, no matter the cost. There are times when, if a person's will is strong enough, anything can happen. But no amount of desire can make some things right." Now there's a thought that's gonna fester. Li Qian's eyes reddened. She stubbornly looked away, as if her feelings of being wronged were a vulnerability that shouldn't be shown to anyone else. After a while, in a muffled voice, she said, "Yeah, I'm just an ordinary person. What does it matter what life throws at me? My only real family suddenly passes away, leaving me with parents who hate me. No one acknowledges my efforts. I have to desperately scrape tuition together every year, and even after working so hard, I still can't find a single proper job in Dragon City. Other people must think I'm incredibly pitiful, right? I have to endure this constant stream of awful things. Maybe I never should have brought my grandma back. Maybe I should have died with her." Zhao Yunlan looked at her calmly, not interrupting. Barely audible, she continued. "I feel like a turtle struggling to crawl across the ground. If someone passes by and gives me a little kick, I'll end up on my back. Then they'll watch my agonized flailing, and when I'm finally back upright and exhausted, they'll kick me again. It'll all have been for nothing. Hilarious, isn't it?" There was an indescribable resentment and discontent in this girl, for all her apparent effort to hide it. Go Chengcheng's face felt hot. He didn't think he was intelligent or hardworking. He had always drifted through life, never quite knowing what was going on, and then a job had fallen into his lap. Now he stood up and stammered ingratiatingly, I'll go get you some water." Li Qian, lost in her own emotions, ignored him. Zhao Yunlan pressed. The reincarnation dial responded to you. Your grandma was brought back, but her health was never quite the same. Were you the one taking care of her?" "Who else?" Li Qian was expressionless. "Bringing her here was a huge sacrifice for my parents to begin with, but they had to keep up appearances." Zhao Yunlan nodded. "You had to study, earn your own tuition and living expenses, and care for your grandma on top of it all. It must have been really hard, huh?" At this point, Lin Jing finally looked at his superior, caught off guard. He'd initially thought Zhao Yunlan had asked him to play along in order to trick the truth out of this young woman who'd lied about the Hunger Ghost case. But listening to the line of questioning, Lin Jing wasn't sure exactly what Zhao Yunlan wanted to find out. How had they gotten so far off topic? The soul-executing emissary had been sitting to the side, back straight, with no sign of impatience. Lin Jing was in no position to butt in, so he could only sit there and listen in confusion. Go Cheng Chung keenly poured a cup of warm water and passed it to Li Qian. She accepted without thanking him. Her eyebrow twitched nervously as she stared at the cup in her hands. She looked calm, but tremors appeared on the water's surface. She would wake up at 4:30 every morning because she wanted to make me breakfast. As time went on, she got more and more confused. Once she was boiling milk and didn't even realize that it had boiled over and put the flame out. We nearly had a gas leak. I didn't dare let her make breakfast again after that, but telling her was no use. You could tell her one day and she'd do it again the next day, so I had to get up at 4:30 too and make breakfast. Then, during the day, I'm not home. I have to juggle my classes, helping my advisor with projects and intern work. No matter where I am, the bus ride is 40 minutes to an hour, so I had to rush home to make her lunch, then pour her hot water and make her take her medication. I didn't have time to eat before rushing back. Once I came home in the evening, I'd have to get her settled before I could study for a bit, and I could never get much done. She was old, so she always wanted to talk, no matter the time or place. She interrupted me a lot. Once she went to bed around 10 p.m., I could finally do some freelance translation work, usually until midnight or later. Sometimes I'd be too exhausted and just fall asleep at my desk. And you ask if it was hard? Ooh, this a little real. Li Qian took a deep breath. Tremendous fatigue showed on her face, as if even speaking were a huge burden. Then a bitter smile replaced the exhaustion as she took a sip of water, hiding her expression. There's no point talking about all of that, she said icily. Let's get this over with. What other questions do you have about the case? Hurry up and ask. Zhao Yunlin tapped lightly on the file. This may sound heartless, but after your grandma passed away, things got a lot easier for you, didn't they? What's that supposed to mean? She spat, glaring. Just what I said, answered Zhao Yunlin, unmoved. Li Qian's lips trembled. She stood abruptly, knocking over her cup and spilling the remaining water everywhere. Is this how the police operate? You detain innocent citizens for no reason, then slander them however you want? Sit down. Don't get so worked up. Zhao Yunlin pulled out a few tissues to wipe the table off. I'm describing human nature, not slandering you. Even if you wanted to bomb the Pentagon, no one in the world could say you did something wrong as long as you didn't act on it. We don't have thought crimes here. Voice hard, Li Qian said. I want to go home. You have no right to detain me. Zhao Yunlin glanced at her and nodded. Okay, we'll get back on topic for now. Let's just chat about this morning. You told me you saw Lou Romay at the school entrance, along with the shadow following her. Can you remember what it looked like? Li Qian's brow creased. I didn't see it clearly. I don't really remember. He laughed, showing his dimples, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was getting sharper. It's one thing to not remember a person who just passed by or whether the driver in a car crash was a man or a woman. That's all normal. But to not remember something that's got you this scared? If you don't remember, why are you shaking right now? Li Qian froze, slim fingers clenching nervously. Zhao Yunlin's tone turned severe. Just this morning you were describing its height, how it was totally black, a bit short and a little chubby. The color drained completely from her face. Zhao Yunlin narrowed his eyes. Tongshui, changing your statement on a whim isn't a good habit. Was that description accurate or not? Lin Jing had a lot of experience working with him. While Li Qian was still sitting in shock with no time to organize her thoughts, he seized the opportunity to pound on the table. Tell us! Zhao Yunlin had been adding layers of pressure, pushing Li Qian's nerves to their limits, and now Lin Jing slashed through them with one strike. So what if it was? Li Qian blurted. Oh. Not tall. A little chubby. Zhao Yunlin enunciated each word. He leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands on the table. Then was it a man or a woman, old or young? Of everyone in the room, only Li Qian didn't know what the Hunger Ghost looked like. None of those words, man or woman, young or old, applied to it. It wasn't even shaped like a human. It was practically skin and bones other than its massive, bulging belly and the size of a human, but with mantis-like arms. Go Cheng Cheng's expression turned confused as he looked at her. The soul-executing emissary simply sat there, radiating his terrifying presence. The plain fact was that Li Qian didn't have much life experience, so she wasn't hard to read. To Li Qian, it felt like countless people were staring at her, faces cold as they scrutinized and ridiculed her. They all knew her secret, despite how well she thought she had hidden it. She began to panic. Zhao Yunlun's voice fell almost to a whisper. I was lying just now. The human memory can become fuzzy, especially after a sudden scare. That's why eyewitness accounts are often unreliable. That thing was more terrifying than you could bear, so your brain protected itself by blanking out that moment in your memory. From there, your mind automatically filled in that blank. So what you described is what your imagination came up with. The scariest thing it could conceive of. Very belatedly, Guo Chengcheng came to the realization that this was far from a routine questioning. This was an actual interrogation. Though he was stupid, sensitive, and unsure what was happening, he still had a bad sort of feeling. Between the soul-executing emissary's motionless presence and the relentless interrogation, he almost couldn't breathe. Li Qian's deathly pale face turned ashen, and Zhao Yunlun dismissed his warm, pleasant smile. Now, can you tell me why you wanted to commit suicide this morning? He asked. Li Qian's chest heaved. You didn't sleep last night, did you? When you ran to the rooftop, was there a moment when you thought that if you just let go and died, you wouldn't need to be afraid anymore? That no matter what had happened, it would all be wiped clean? Zhao Yunlun's expression was somewhere between a smirk and pity. Young lady, I'm a good few years older than you, so I'm going to call you a kid for now. Many kids your age think they don't fear death. You're young enough to not understand what it truly is, especially a stubborn, decisive, impulsive youngster like you. You think death doesn't scare you at all. Li Qian's instinctive retort was sharp, but her voice was weak. How dare you say that? How would you know if someone understands death or not? I understand that feeling perfectly. I've seen it for myself. One day they're still speaking, and the next thing you know, they've curled up into a ball somewhere you can't see. Their heart stops and their breathing stops, and they slowly get so cold, and then they're just a corpse, a thing that isn't human anymore, and you'll never, ever be able to find her or see her again, not ever. Li Qian, Zhao Yunlun interrupted. The thing you understand and fear isn't death. It's parting. You can't just accept that your grandma suddenly left you. The entire room fell dead silent. Li Qian trembled like a fallen leaf tossed about by the autumn wind. Shit. A moment, please. Entirely too fucking real. There we are. Okay. Ooh. Tense shoulders. Shake it out real quick. Zhao Yunlun broke the silence. That night, what you saw at the school entrance, the shadow following your classmate, was she very old and dressed in simple cotton with a fake bun on her head? As the word left his mouth, the confusion on the faces around the table turned to shock. A short, hoarse scream burst out of Li Qian, her features twisted into a frightening expression. Has she gone insane? Guo Chengcheng thought, his eyes and mouth wide. He didn't understand what exactly was happening. When he looked over at his boss, he saw Zhao Yunlun's fingers rubbing together subconsciously, like he was desperate for a cigarette, but doing his best to resist. His gaze was deep but calm. The light hitting his face and shirt, wrinkled but still snow-white, suddenly gave him an otherworldly air. He pulled a picture out of his pocket, an old woman's memorial photo. She had a kind, benevolent countenance with a smile lurking at the corners of her mouth, and her expression was at peace. Guo Chengcheng immediately recognized her as the old lady who had rushed to place herself in front of Li Qian's hospital bed at the most dangerous moment. Zhao Yunlun pushed the photo toward Li Qian, steepling his fingers under his chin, which was dusted with stubble from days of continuous overtime. He said, "This is Mrs. Wang Yufen, born in the spring of 1940. She passed away late last month. Cause of death, mistaken consumption of hypoglycemic medication." Li Qian stared at the memorial photo, eyes so wide that Guo Chengcheng suspected they were about to fall out. Zhao Yunlan continued. Your grandma raised you. You two were always close. You used the reincarnation doll for her and gave her half your life. But once she came back to life, her mind began to slowly erode. You took care of her the whole time. My colleague told me that nearly everything in your online shopping history is some sort of product for the elderly, and according to her doctors, even after her mind started to go, she was never remotely aggressive toward anyone. So tell me, what made you think your grandma would harm you after her death? Why are you so afraid of her? For all the reactions she showed, Lian might have been a human wax figure. Why won't you speak? Zhao Yunlan asked. Lian, I'll ask one last time. If you don't tell the truth, you'll never have another opportunity to speak honestly again. You'll want to be free of this burden, but that will be impossible. A lie will always be a lie. Once you carelessly pick it up, you'll be unable to put it down again for as long as you live. Just that day, someone else had told her something similar. Lian's dull gaze gradually lifted inch by inch. Zhao Yunlan leaned forward slightly. Looking into her eyes and pausing after every word, he said, My colleague told me that 2 lives connected through the reincarnation dial will live and die together. And yet somehow you're still alive, even though your grandma had passed on. That presumably means she died before her time was up. At first I couldn't figure it out. How could she die prematurely? Did a reaper make a mistake, or did someone detain her soul illegally? Then I realized I was missing the obvious explanation. The connection between her life and the reincarnation dial. It was tethered to what was unexpectedly broken. In other words, the person who gave her that life was also the one who killed her. When an old person's mind slips away, they're like a child. They're useless. They want to eat all sorts of things, and they tend to eat whatever snacks there are at home. So tell me, who put that bottle of hypoglycemic medication beside the box she so often ate candies from? In the silence that followed, one could have heard a pin drop. Within the span of a few seconds, Lian's face underwent a transformation. Her initial extreme horror swelled like a balloon being inflated, but just as it seemed unable to contain anymore, a surprising calm settled over her features. Go Chengcheng held his breath. Lian's voice, faintly hoarse, pierced the silence. Quietly, she said, It was me. That's the end of the chapter. Let me check chapter length here. We're on page 169 for chapter 12. But let me just check real quick. Oh no. We just have a few pages left before we hit the end of the first arc. All right. Well then. When I was little, my grandma would wake me up every morning, braid my hair, and take me to school. I was always still sleepy, so every day I leaned against her and dozed while she did my braids. Once she was done, she'd give me a gentle pat on the back of my head and say, "Wake up, lazy bones." Then she'd drag me to school. On the way, she would tell me stories from Journey to the West, from Sun Wukong's 3 battles against the White Bone Spirit, to Jubaijie? Eating watermelons. She had the entire Heroes and Sui and Tang dynasties in her head, and was a better storyteller than the ones on the radio. Neither of my parents cared for me, so anytime someone asked me who I liked best, I always chose my grandma. Lian wasn't speaking to anyone else in the room, only to herself. Zhao Yunlan finally couldn't take it anymore. He fished out a cigarette and began playing with it between his fingers, but he said nothing. Uncomprehending, Go Chengcheng asked, "But then later, you stopped liking her?" Lian gave him a long look. "I remember you said before that you'd have been willing to exchange your life for your grandma's. Good thing your family didn't have the reincarnation dial." Go Cheng Cheng stared at her blankly, then began groping for an explanation for what he couldn't understand. Did you think she was a burden? Was it too much pressure for you? And life got too... The rims of Li Qian's eyes were so red that they looked like they were about to bleed, but her gaze was still numb and cold. They held an indescribable kind of cruelty, bordering on inhuman, and yet somehow perfectly human. She cut Go Cheng Cheng off. Don't insult me with such a stupid reason. Go Cheng Cheng's face went red. She slowly became a different person. Every day she nagged me constantly. She wouldn't remember what had happened the day before and just constantly repeated the same thing over and over. Toward the end, she even started losing control of her bowels. Every time she wet herself, she'd give me a vacant smile. When she ate, she got grains of rice all over herself on the floor. Even just sitting there, she drooled. She couldn't even tell time. No matter what you were busy with, she'd stumble around behind you, mumbling incoherently day after day, day after day. And every single day I'd look at her and think, this is what I exchanged half my life for. The corner of Li Qian's lips twitched in an abrupt, frigid smile. Go Cheng Cheng felt like his heart was being crushed. The grandma I want will never come back. The thing I paid such a huge price for was just... And Li Qian's face twisted harshly as she spat out the cruelest words. A monster that looked like her. Lifting her red eyes, she stared into Go Cheng Cheng's face. I hate her. Every single day of the year, every time I saw her, I wanted to kill her. Despite all that, I still had to speak so patiently and kindly and ask if she wanted to eat anything, if she wanted to go to the bathroom, and whether she was tired or cold. And in return, she'd just give me that stupid smile. Go Cheng Cheng's hand trembled on his knee. Do you get it? The reincarnation dial lied to me. Nothing in the world can truly bring back the dead. That person wasn't my grandma, before she was afraid of me suffering even the tiniest bit. When I was little, there was no electric fans in our village. She'd stay up the whole night to fan me by hand. How could she turn into a monster? How could she turn into a monster who did nothing but hurt me? Li Qian laughed sharply. You don't understand anything, so don't you dare judge me. When she was alive, she harassed me nonstop. Now that she's dead, she still won't stop. She won't anymore, Go Cheng Cheng interrupted in a stern voice he didn't know he could muster. She disappeared. You were possessed by something and the Hunger Ghost was about to eat you, so she let herself be killed by the Hunger Ghost to protect you. We all saw. She died again. Everyone knows but you. Bitch. Oh. 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 Li Qian froze. Go Cheng Cheng lowered his head, upset almost to the point of crying, but for whom he didn't know. In the end, very quietly, he said, even if you had seen, you still would have believed she wanted to hurt you, wouldn't you? But she didn't. She wasn't harassing you at all. She didn't blame you, and she never wanted to harm you. You believe hearts to be fickle because your own feelings change so casually. It's just a line from a poem. I'll tell you which one in a second. This is in italics. I don't think this was said out loud, but it still hits. Because it comes with a footnote. A line from a poem by the Qing Dynasty poet Nara Husinga? Shit! I've got to write that down. I'm sorry. Hang on. That would be page... Excuse me. Page 171. I'll be writing that down in a second. I think I understand it all now. But premeditated murder isn't under our jurisdiction. Zhao Yanlan stood up as he spoke, patting Go Cheng Cheng's shoulder. Let's go. We don't need to send her back. We'll keep her here overnight, then tomorrow we'll tell Zhu Hong to contact our colleagues who handle criminal cases in the city. If she needs to be taken away, then take her away. If she needs to be investigated, then investigate. Tomorrow morning I'll call Shenlo She to tell him... Or is there something else, Lord Emissary? The soul-executing emissary had walked around the little table, stopping in front of Li Qian. She cowered instinctively in his presence. "Do not be afraid. I do not trespass upon the concerns of mortals," he said. "However, when it comes to the hallowed artifact, I must do my due diligence. You spoke of finding the reincarnation dial in your hometown. Where is it now?" It's at my place," Lian said quietly. "My parents rented a little spot for us to live. They rarely stop by." "What is the address?" "South City Street, Building X, Room XXX. "Thank you." The emissary gave a courteous nod, seeming to look at Lian. Then he paused and said mildly, "One day we will meet in the netherworld. On that day, I will await you with justice." Okay. Go Cheng followed Zhao Yunlan out, his mind a whirl. After escorting the emissary to the door, he still seemed unsatisfied by how things had played out. He took one last look back at Lian, who was still sitting there, dazed. The soul-executing emissary departed quickly in order to retrieve the reincarnation dial before dawn broke. In his wake, the white frost on the windows visibly melted away and the temperature in the office rose quickly. The climate control switched back to cooling mode, but Go Cheng still felt wave after wave of chills down his back. He followed Zhao Yunlan like a little tail, looking as if he wanted to say something. Zhao Yunlan grabbed his car keys and bag, then glanced at him. "We're done now. Aren't you leaving?" Go Cheng looked down at his toes. "Director Zhao, after the Hunger Ghost tears souls apart, can they still live? Can they still reincarnate?" Zhao Yunlan's eyebrow rose. "It isn't likely." Then that old lady's really gone?" Zhao Yunlan pretended to think about it for a second, then suddenly smiled and took a small bottle from his pocket. He beckoned Go Cheng over like a dog. "I almost forgot. Here, kid." Go Cheng came closer, confused. "Take this. The soul-executing emissary gave me this just now. On occasion, the Lord Emissary can be merciful and lenient." Zhao Yunlan shoved the little bottle into Go Cheng's hand. Then he walked to the office cat bed and reached out to pinch Daching's nose like the annoyance he was. He watched as Daching, who was still sleeping, let out a noise like a snore and flailed with his paws, trying to scratch, at which point Zhao Yunlan cheerfully let go. "Whoever gets here early tomorrow morning, remember to ask the cafeteria to fry some dried fish and bring it over. Can I speak?" Go Cheng looked down at the glass bottle, which was smaller than his palm. At first he was confused, but then his eyes widened. The old lady who had disappeared was inside. She was the size of a fingernail, sitting there peacefully. She gave him a light smile, and then suddenly her wrinkled face smoothed out. Her hair grew longer, black flowing from its roots to its end. Strong new teeth appeared in her mouth as her body straightened and became slender. The mature beauty of her 30s was restored, then the youthful prettiness of her 20s, and then, slowly, she became thinner and shorter. She was a girl now, a child, and finally, a baby curled up on her side. The baby slowly closed her eyes, and then the tiny body was gone. Shocked, Go Cheng exclaimed, She disappeared." "That's a bottle of rebirth. She's re-entered the reincarnation cycle," said Lin Jing, who would come up behind him at some point. "From life to death, then from death to life, from youth to old age, then from old age back to youth again and again, never ending." Having said that, Lin Jing looked down, chanted a quick Amitabha, and added, "We're done. Go home. Work starts tomorrow morning at 9, but the cafeteria starts serving breakfast at 8. If you want some, come earlier. Don't be late." It seemed that one of Go Cheng's wishes had been granted. He carefully put the bottle in his bag and left, satisfied. Having gotten rid of the gullible little intern, Lin Jing turned to Zhao Yunlan. "I didn't see the emissary pass you anything. Lian touched the hallowed artifact from the netherworld without permission, so she must suffer this hardship. The old woman was willing to take it for her, so she died for a reason. It's all just cause and effect, so what is there to be lenient about?" Zhao Yunlan said. "So you're the only smart one here, the only one with a sharp eye. Are you happy now?" "I heard you were completely dissatisfied with that intern, that he only got in here because he has connections and that you wanted to get rid of him," said Lin Jing. "Why did you subtly comfort him like that?" Lighting a cigarette, Zhao Yunlan waved at him impatiently. Because I fucking wanted to. Why are you still here? Lin Jing shook his head and sighed, looking like he wanted to express some opinion about his boss, but when Zhao Yunlan's sharp gaze cut toward him, Lin Jing's opinion quickly became, wise men don't go against the tide. Grabbing the water bottle on his desk, he made his escape. Zhao Yunlan locked up the office. He'd intended to go home and sleep, but found himself thinking of the emissary who'd left in such a hurry. He couldn't shake his curiosity about the hallowed artifact, so he headed to Li Qian's address, telling himself that he'd just skip work the next day, even if it was a despicable move. When Zhao Yunlan arrived, he found the entire building caged inside a pitch-black aura that thrummed with bloodshed. Unable to imagine what might have caused it, he parked on the roadside and hurried upstairs, gun drawn. A huge black hole hovered above the building, like the gaping maw of a gigantic monster. The elevators weren't working, so Zhao Yunlan ran all the way up to the roof, which he found littered with corpses and bones. He took a close look at the corpses, trying to figure out what kind of monsters had died there. Some had 3 heads, some had bellies on both sides, and some had human heads on skeletal bodies. But what they all had in common was that they'd been beheaded in a single stroke. The moonlight struck the ground like a coating of fresh blood. Not far away, the soul-executing emissary stood, soul-executing blade in hand. The blade was held to a person's throat. Perhaps person wasn't quite right. The being's features were horrifically warped and warty, inspiring both fear and revulsion. What kind of monster is this? Zhao Yunlan reached into his jacket. My lord soul-executing emissary, do you need a hand? The soul-executing emissary waved at him, without turning around. Speaking to the wart-covered creature, he said, I will ask one final time. Where is the reincarnation dial? Oh, shit! Oh, damn. Ooh, do we have art of this? Hang on. Oh, my God. Excuse me. Woo. This has some of my favorite art, I must say. The specific style they have for this is really, really good. I am enjoying it greatly. Like, that's terrifying. Is it not? That's just legitimately... The monster turned its neck stiffly under the table and looked under the blade. Table? I cannot fucking read today. And looked in Zhao Yunlan's direction. It replied to the emissary, but didn't answer his question. My master asked me to convey a message. My lord, you have performed your duties meticulously for centuries, each day like the one before. You've avoided the person enshrined at the tip of your heart, much as you'd avoid raging floods and savage beasts. To all appearances, you are the epitome of self-control, but don't you truly fear being unable to control yourself? We're out here reading the emissary to filth as well, apparently. The emissary said nothing, but the coldness emanating from him grew heavier. My master has tremendous sympathy for your deep feelings, my lord, and went to the effort of having him brought before you. He wished to see if you are truly without desire, without... This time the emissary didn't let the creature finish. His blade flashed, turning the wart-covered head into a fountain of blood. The stench it unleashed was foul enough to make one's head spin. Then a wind swept over the roof, so fierce that Zhao Yunlan was forced to close his eyes. When it died down, the roof had returned to normal, as if the corpses and monsters strewn over it had never existed. Zhao Yunlan called out, "Oh, wait, my lord!" The soul-executing emissary turned without approaching, and bowed in farewell, hands clasped. Offering no explanation, he quickly ducked into the black hole. In that always composed figure, Zhao Yunlan actually detected a hint of panic. When the soul-executing blade came out, even gods stayed away. Who would dare challenge him to his face? Zhao Yunlan's brows creased in thought. The reincarnation dial, said to wreak havoc upon the reincarnation cycle, had been stolen. But by whom? And that's the end of the arc. That's and it's after 5. I gotta go. That's how that arc ends. Holy shit. Okay. Whoo. Whoo. That was a lot. This session had a lot. A lot. Arc 2, by the way, is called Mountain River All. All is in AWL. And we will start on page 181 for chapter 13 when we come back on Thursday. Jeez. We kind of ran the whole ass gamut. We had some gay in the beginning, and then we got 2 fucking frighteningly real there for a bit, with some dashes of, scary shit in there. And then creepy, sexy mystery about the emissary. Yes, thank you. Yes, please. May I have some more? You named my price. I'm in. Whew. I will be here in 2 days on Thursday to start Arc 2. I do streams reading very gay things on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm terribly excited to get into Arc 2. I will see you then. Please take care of yourselves, because I love you very much.